Welcome, everyone. I'll just give it a minute or two to give people a chance to join us. And we'll kick this off. I think we have a fair amount of people. We could get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Azure Envision, hosted by Ingram Micro. Today's session is all about helping you design resilient, secure, and cost-effective Azure architecture focused on high availability, data protection, and business continuity. So this is not a theory-heavy session. We'll be walking you through real customer scenarios to show you how to position end-to-end Azure solutions. So next slide, please. My name is Ashraf Adnan. I'm the Azure Sales Specialist at Ingram Micro, and I'll be co-hosting today's session alongside Girish Sharma, our Azure Solutions Engineer, and Microsoft MVP. We'll be walking you through the technical architecture, service choices, and design considerations behind each of the three unique customer scenarios that we've prepared for you today. So the goal is to balance business outcomes and technical depth. So whether you're sales focused or technical or both, you'll walk away with something actionable today. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage everyone to drop your questions in the chat as we move through this session, and we'll get to your questions at the end. So Azure Envision is designed as a new style workshop for our partner community. We focus on educating partners on modern cloud practices, showcasing how Azure deals run from start to finish, and we cover all stages from profiling customer opportunities, architecture and pricing to final deployments. Before moving on to the customer scenarios, a quick reminder that Ingram Micro can support your opportunities across the entire Azure lifecycle. So you can rely on our professional services team for migration services, discovery and assessment, roadmap planning, cost optimization and multi-cloud management, security assessment, and much more. So please reach out to your Azure representative for more information. All right, let's get started. So today we'll walk you through three customer scenarios. Customer one focuses on high availability. Customer two on data protection with Azure Backup Services, and customer three on business continuity using Azure Site Recovery. Each scenario increases in scope from single region availability to data protection to full disaster recovery, mirroring how most customers evolve their Azure strategy. So the first customer we have today for you is Contoso Inc., which is a gaming startup planning its first Azure deployment to host multiplayer game servers, backend services, and a player database. With traffic spikes during game launches and peak hours, downtime is not acceptable. The company wants its applications to remain available during VM, platform, or data center failures, but has limited knowledge of cloud redundancy models. They are looking for a cost-effective Azure design that uses redundant compute instances, resilient networking, and replicated data to ensure high availability while staying within a startup budget. So I'll hand it over to Girish to walk us through the scenario.
Thank you, Ashraf. If you can confirm I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome once again to all the partners. We really appreciate your participation and support to these workshops. My name is Girish Sharma. Now, one of the biggest decisions any company going to take in their digital transformation is to adopt cloud. Whether that involves moving their infrastructure from on-premises or if they're doing their deployment for the first time in cloud. As in the case of Contoso Incorporation, which is a gaming startup company, and they have a lot of questions related to cloud, and rightly so. They have the specific requirement from high availability, resiliency, and protection. And they want to make sure the public cloud vendor that they're going to go with checks all the boxes based on their requirement. So let's see what Microsoft Azure has to offer here. With more than 60 plus region, multiple data centers and edge sites, and thousands of kilometers of fiber and subsea cable, Microsoft is hosting some of the most critical infrastructure and application in their data center. Now, why this number is important? Because as a thumb rule, as a company, you want to go and deploy your resources closer to your customer base. And the chances are you'll find one of the region with so much coverage across the globe. Having said that, not all data centers are the same. In Microsoft Azure hierarchy, we have certain data center which are bigger as compared to other. But the chances are, based on your requirement, you'll get a data center which will serve your need, and you'll be able to deploy the matching workload based on your requirement. Nowadays, you cannot have any IT discussion without data residency and compliance, which is an important component in any IT discussion. In Azure, we have this concept of paired region. The definition of a paired region is that these two regions needs to be separated by certain distance, typically at least more than 100 miles. Data will be replicated from one region to another, but still keeping your data within the geographical boundary of that country. Now, if I take example of Canada, we have two. We have Central, which is in Toronto, and we have East, which is in Quebec City. By default, when you go and deploy resources, Microsoft is going to create a locally redundant storage. It means you will have 3 copies within one region. But you can go and configure this and apply geo-redundancy. It means that your data will be replicated to a secondary region, which is a paired region, but again, still keeping that within the geographical boundary of that country, allowing you to achieve compliance and data residency laws. So let's explore some of the options that Contoso Incorporation can utilize when it comes to high availability. Now, when you go and deploy your workloads, it is residing on a physical stack. Now, that stack is connected to a switch or a power supply. And these are typically your virtual machines, which are on a hypervisor and needs to be updated regularly. That's where the concept of fault domain and update domain will come into play. Now, when you go and deploy your resources in availability set, which I'm going to show you, by the way, on the Azure portal, how to do that, the onus will be on Microsoft to make sure that not two machines are sharing the same switch. And also, not two machines at the same time are going to be updated. So it means if one of the application for which they have been given access to, because you have deployed that across availability sets, giving you higher redundancy and fault tolerance. Now, at least we are aware of regions as well as data center. If you look at any hierarchy of any Azure region, typically that is divided into multiple zones. These are nothing but multiple data center. And each of these data center has its own power supply, heating, and cooling. Now you have this option of going and deploy this in one availability zones only. But what happens in case that data center goes down? And that's where availability zones will come into play, because you can go and span your resources across availability zones. So even the entire data center within that region goes down, your services will be still up, giving you higher redundancy. And that's where the availability zones gives you higher SLAs as compared to an availability set. So Contoso Incorporation have certain decisions to make. As a company, you can go and deploy a single machine, and you can attach a regular spinning hard drive, what we call a standard HDD, but that is prone to a single point of failure. You can also have a hardware failure in case you're deploying that a single node in a data center, which can lead to a server or rack issue. We talked about zones. You can go and deploy a single machine in a zone, and in case the entire data goes down, you will not be able to achieve high availability in that case. And in certain scenario, though it's pretty seldom, but the entire region can also goes down, leading to disruption of your services when it comes to availability for your end customers. And then on top of that, as an administrator, you have to deal with data corruption. You might be hit with ransomware, or might be a rogue administrator which can go and delete your resources. So as a company, Contoso can go and deploy a machine with a premium storage, which will give you an SLA of 99.9%. You can go and deploy an availability set, which has a little bit higher SLA of 99.95. And then you can also go and span your resources across availability zone, which gives you almost 100% of redundancy with an SLA of 99.99%. And again, you always have this option of replication of your resources across region by utilizing combination of different services, which we're going to talk about later in this workshop. But some of these options definitely Contoso Incorporation can use confidently and make sure that the high availability is part of their overall architecture. So how does that look like when it comes to pricing out these kind of opportunity when you're going and having those discussion with your end customer? For that, let me flip over to the Azure pricing calculator. And by the way, this is a tool we typically use in order to price out any opportunity. So let me log in into this. And as you can see on the left side of the blade, you have some popular services which you typically come across. And then it's also segregated by category like compute, networking, AI, machine learning, integration, identity. You can go and segregate that. Now, if I go and type in availability sets, you don't find any service, right? Or even in that case, even availability zones, that option is not there because this is not a service. These are the features that are part of this cloud deployment. But typically, when you go and deploy these resources, you're going to go and deploy this in pair, whether it's availability set or availability zone, and you're going to attach maybe a load balancer with that. So let me take example of doing that. So I'm going to add a virtual machine here. And you can pick your region of your choice. You can go and pick your operating system, whether it's going to be Windows, Linux. You can pick your database, if it's going to have SQL Server hosted or just an operating system. And you can also pick the tier, right, whether it's basic and standard. Typically, for any production grade environment, you're going to pick a standard tier because that unlocks all the machines or all the workloads which are associated as part of that data center, right? And then you can pick how many hours this machine is going to run. Typically, by default, it's going to pick 730 hours, which is number of hours on an average in a month. But if you think that your workloads are not going to run 24/7, you can always go and tweak that number. Now, in my case, I'm going to pick a machine. For the example's sake, let me pick a B series machine, B4S with a 4 CPU and 16 gig RAM. Another part of this cost consumption going to be your storage cost. You can pick from different like premium, standard, and standard HDD. Now, because it's a production grade environment, I'm going to pick premium SSD. Now, by the way, talking about storage, you can see a standard HDD option also available. Microsoft is going to retire this in by 2028. So you have enough time in case you're running any workload on standard HDD. By default, that will be automatically migrated to a standard SSD. But in this case, I want to use a premium SSD because that gives me higher SLAs. And if you want, you can always tweak the numbers. So in this case, I'm going to go and deploy this across zones. So I'm going to pick 2 machines here. So this will give me the cost of my compute, my license, as well as the cost of the storage. I also want to attach a load balancer for this. For that, I'm going to go under the networking tab and let me pick a load balancer. And for this example, I'm going to pick standard load balancer because that gives me zone redundancy. So with both these options picked, I can go and save this in the currency of my choice. In this case, I'm going to pick in Canadian dollar. I can always export this in Excel sheet. You can always save this for your future reference, or if you want, you can also share a link with your end customer, because the price that you see is end customer pricing. So great way of sharing this with your end customer. But this is the way you're going to go and price out opportunity for your end customer, right? So in this case, Contoso Incorporation, because they want redundancy, these are some of the options which are available for you. So with this, let me also flip over to the Azure portal to show you some of the options which are there that you can go and deploy. So you can see I'm logged on to portal.azure.com, and I have the owner access. It means I have a complete, I have full control of what I can do. So in Azure, we have different roles, starting with owner, which is the topmost, with complete access. And then as you go down, for example, contributor, reader, and you can also have some specific roles also based on the job description. You can give those roles and give access to the people in your organization. Let me go and search for availability set. I can go and pick this from here. That's one way of doing it. So in case you're not sure, you can always search in the global search bar, or I can also expand these three lines. I can go under the all services, and I can go in the computer, or I can go and search over here. You can see I have availability set. You can also click on the star button, as you can see here, and that will pin this under the favorite category so that you don't have to search for every now and then, right? So let's go and pick this, and let's try to create one. So creating is very simple. You can go and click on the create button. You can pick the subscription under which these resources will be created. You can go and create a resource group, which is like a logical container. If you don't have any, you can always go and create. In my case, I have a couple of them. Let me just go and pick AIRG. You can give the name for this. Pick the region of your choice. You can have the fault domain and update domain, which we explained. And you can also go and deploy this under proximity placement group. And by the way, we didn't talk about proximity placement group, but in simple term, as I discussed, a region consists of multiple data center. Now, these data centers are huge, right? If you want, you can also go and deploy a proximity placement group, and you have a requirement in which your application is really latency sensitive. You can go and deploy them under PPG, so that will create a group for you. And geographically, if you look at distance-wise, it will keep it closer to you, both these workloads within the same data center. In case you have any application which is again latency sensitive, you can go and deploy that with proximity placement group also. So in my case right now, I'm going to avoid it. You can go and also tag it, and you can go and review and create. It's as simple as that. And you can click on the create button. So it should not take that long. So you can see the deployment is in progress. You can always keep a track of by clicking on this notification bell. And as you can see that my deployment was complete, right? So this is the way you can go and deploy an availability set. And right now there's no machine that I have in this, but you can go and add your workloads. And as I said, typically it's going to be in pairs. So if I go and pick a VM here and click on the create button, in my case, I'm going to pick AIRG, that's my resource group. And let's say I want to name this machine. My region will be Canada Central. And under the availability option, you have a couple of options. As you can see, I have availability zones, which we discussed. You have virtual machine scale set, which is another way. By the way, in virtual machine scale set, in the backend, it is using availability sets, right? But since we are talking about availability set, I'm going to pick that. And it should pop up for me. So you can see the one that we created, AS2. So I'm going to pick. So that's the way I'm going to add multiple machines in availability set, and that will be segregated across different fault domain and update domain. But in case I want to achieve even higher redundancy, I can go and pick availability zones, as you can see, right? You can pick this option of self-selected zone, or you can also have specific one, and you have typically 3 zones to pick from. And with this, Microsoft is going to distribute this across multiple zones. So in case the entire data center within the region goes down, your application will be still up and your customer will be still be able to access those resources. So these are some of the ways you can go and achieve redundancy, and especially in case of Contoso Incorporation, because they are a startup company, they have a lot of questions whether they want to go with public cloud. But some of these points you can bring it in the conversation with them to make them feel comfortable and also showcase, what capabilities Microsoft Azure has. So with this, it completes our scenario number one. And with that, I'm going to go back to the slide and let's go to the second scenario, which is for Northwood traders. Over to you, Ashraf.
Right. Up next, Northwind Traders, which is an investment company running mission-critical workloads on Azure, including virtual machines, Azure SQL databases, and file shares that store sensitive business and customer data. As a regulated organization, they must meet strict compliance and data protection requirements, including secure backups, defined retention policies, and the ability to quickly recover from accidental deletion, corruption, or ransomware attacks. The company is looking to use Azure Backup Services to implement a centralized, compliant, and cost-effective backup strategy that protects data across Azure resources while meeting regulatory and audit expectations. So back to you, Girish. Please walk us through this case.
Thank you, Ashraf. This is another classic scenario that we come across quite often. And you won't believe how many conversation we had with our partner base, and sometimes they are under the impression that because my data is hosted in cloud, it'll be the responsibility of that vendor to make sure that it is protected, which is not the case, obviously. In the end of the day, it's a shared responsibility model. It means that any vendor that you go and pick, it is their responsibility to provide you with the infrastructure. But when it comes to high availability, redundancy, protection of your data, it will be solely the responsibility of customers. So they need to put all these solutions in place to make sure that they are able to achieve any regulatory requirements, whether you're dealing with regulated industry like bank, government, or even in general, you want to protect your workloads from accidental deletion, right? We talk about rogue administrator. We also have sometimes those kind of scenarios, ransomware. All these kind of scenarios are great fit, but in the end of the day, as a customer, it's your responsibility to make sure your data is protected. So let's look into a little bit more deeply what options Microsoft Azure has. So if you look at in the last 20 years or so, our IT infrastructure or IT landscape has changed a lot. We have moved away from the mainframe computers. We started adopting virtualization technology, whether these are the Hyper-Vs, the VMwares. And then we slowly also started adopting hybrid cloud with some resources on premises and certain in cloud, which is typically that we see across our partner base. And then in certain cases also, a lot of companies, they also have complete deployment with no infrastructure on premises, fully in the cloud. So if our infrastructure has changed over a period of time, can we still utilize the same data protection solution? Not really, and that's what we hear from the partners. Because the solution they're utilizing, some of them, they are good in protecting virtualized environment. Some of them, they do physical. And even though some of them, they can provide both physical as well as virtualized protection, a few of them only integrates with Azure services or in general cloud services, which we call it typically hybrid kind of deployment. So it's very important that regardless of what kind of scenario you have or what kind of infrastructure you have in place, the backup solution you're going to utilize is able to protect it confidently. Now, that's where Azure Backup Services can come and shine, because not only you can go and protect your cloud native solution, but also if you have hybrid deployment, you can go and utilize this. And some of the solutions, some of the options are there on this slide. Starting with the bottom, you have file and folder level backup, which is typically done by utilizing MAS agent, what you call it, Microsoft Azure Recovery Service Agent. Now, it has its own limitation. This is first of all only designed for Windows operating system. So whether you're utilizing server or even a workstation like client operating system like Windows 10, 11, you can utilize this, but only like file and folder level backup. This will allow you to create a copy in the cloud, nothing on premises. So you can do disk to cloud in that case, but that is an option. You can go and enable that as part of Azure Backup Service. But if you want a full-blown solution, right? If you want an application-aware backup, you have crash-consistent backups, whether you're utilizing different kind of applications, different operating system, and even spread across different hypervisors, you can make use of Azure Backup Services, which is a full-blown service which requires a appliance that needs to be deployed. It can be a physical or it can be a virtualized. And if you've been utilizing DPM or Data Protection Manager, which used to be or still part of System Center Configuration Manager, it has exactly same capabilities with only one exception. And that exception is that DPM can also let you back up to a tape, but with Azure Backup Services, you can create a copy in the cloud. So not only you can do disk to disk, but also you want to create a copy on premises and you want to duplicate in the cloud, which is D to D to C. That is also possible. But this scenario is typically coming across in case you're going to utilize hybrid solution, right? But in case of cloud native, if you have totally cloud infrastructure, there is no infrastructure to deploy, and that's where the Northwind Traders is coming from because they have fully adopted to cloud. All their workstations, uh, their servers, their databases, everything is running in the cloud, and they want to protect that, and that does not require any kind of infrastructure. And I'm going to show you that in Azure portal in a moment. So when it comes to pricing it out, it can be divided into, there are two parts to the price for this, right? The first part is that it is based on the protected instance. So depending upon how many machines you're trying to protect, the cost will be based on that, and it can be divided further into three categories based on how much data you have. So if your data is between 0 to 50 gig, you're going to pay the cost that you see, and I think that's in Canadian dollar. If you fall into the second category, which is 51 to 500 gig, then you fall in the second tier. And then anything above 500 gig, then that will be incremental of the middle tier, which is 1386. That's you're going to be your cost number one. And then obviously the data need to land somewhere, right? So it needs to be stored in some sort of storage. Typically, Microsoft utilizes blob storage for that. And depending upon what kind of redundancy you're going to pick, whether it's locally redundant, zone redundant, geo-redundant, the cost will be based on that. So these are two cost components where your cost is going to come from. And in case, because it's a Azure native service, in case you're trying to restore something on premises, for the storage transaction, there's no cost. There's no separate cost for that. So that's always an advantage because as you know that with any public cloud implementation, putting the data in, there is no cost. But when you're trying to pull the data, what you call egress, there are costs associated with that. But with Azure Backup Service, there's not going to be any onboard bandwidth charges. But these are the two cost component, and I'm going to show you actually also on the pricing calculator where you can find this service. So for that, let me flip over to the calculator again. And you can either search in the global search bar, or I can go under the management and governance tab. And you can also find Azure Backup here, as you can see. Let's go and click on Add to Estimate. I'm going to click on the View button. Again, pick the region of your choice. In my case, Northwind Traders wants to deploy in Toronto, which is in Central, so I'm going to pick that. There are different kind of infrastructure you can utilize this. You can see Azure VM, on-premises, Azure Files, all these options are available for you. In my example, I'm going to pick Azure VM. You can pick the backup policy type, whether it's standard or enhanced. I'm going to use the default here, and you can see, for example, if I pick, let's say if the data is in the first tier, that's the cost. I think that's in US dollar. Let me change the currency. So that's my cost for the protected instance. And if I increase the number here, you see the cost goes up. And if I go, let's say a terabyte, let's see how much it is, right? So that's the cost for a terabyte of storage. You can always tweak the backup policy, how often you want to back up, and then you can also pick the redundancy, where the other cost is going to come from. You can pick from locally redundant, which is creating 3 copies within one region. You have geo-redundant, which is, by the way, default when you go and create a vault. So creating 6 copies distributed across 2 regions. You have also RAGRS, which is for CRR purposes, cross-region restore. And then you also have zone redundant storage, which is within one region, but distributed across various zones. So you can pick, right? The recommendation is from Microsoft is that you go and select a geo-redundant storage. That's your cost going to be. And then you can always export this in an Excel sheet. You can always save it. Let me just show you how that's going to look like. And you can always share this with your end customer, right? If you want to share the Excel sheet or you want to create a link and share, both the options are available, and you can always tweak it if you want. And always, again, you can save it for your future reference. So with that, you're going to price out this opportunity for Northwood traders. And with that, let me move over to the Azure portal to show you where you're going to find this service. And again, very similar to the first option, you can go and search for Azure Backup Services. Actually, for this, you're going to search for Recovery Service Vault, because that's the name of the service that you're going to go and deploy. So let me pick one. And creating a Recovery Service Vault is pretty straightforward. You can click on the Create button. I can pick the subscription you want, which resource group I want to go and deploy. You can give the name of the recovery service vault. Deploy this in a region. And then you can pick what kind of redundancy you want. As I mentioned that by default, it creates a geo redundancy for you, but you can always tweak it if you want, right? The data is encrypted by default. If you want to use your own keys, you can always do that. You can always enable immutability, right? You can always tag it, and then you can just review and create. It should not take more than a minute or two to spin up this recovery service vault. But in the back end, it's nothing but a blob storage, which is getting spun up. But the service name when it comes to this service is going to be called Recovery Service Vault. So in my case, I already have one, you can see, with the name Girish RSV. The type is Recovery Service Vault. You can see the security level is poor. I'm going to explain that in a moment. What resource group it is in and the location. Let me just go and expand this option for you. And as you can see on the left side of the blade, I have a control. I can track the activity. I can control who has access, the tag, right? Under the settings, I have some options like identity, networking properties, right? This is my complete control plane. Let me just show you by going under the properties tab here. Again, this gives me information about status. It's in active state, and what subscription it is. Let me expand diagnostic settings. And if you want to send the logs from your recovery service vault into a different location, you can always do that. And you can also segregate the logs, as you can see. You can segregate it by category, or you want to send all the logs you want, and you have a couple of destination options. You can send it to a log analytic workspace, which integrates with Azure Monitoring Service, and then you can always, run certain queries against this. You can always archive to a storage account. You can stream it to an event hub, and if you have your own native partner solution, you can always do that. This is for your future reference if you want to keep a track of how your backups are behaving, and even for some time for compliance reasons, that's a great way of doing it, and that's part of the diagnostic settings. Then you also have, obviously, you have backup configuration. Let me go and open it up. And here you can see I can change it. So in my case, for this vault, I had specifically selected locally redundant, but I can also go and pick zone redundant, or I can also pick geo redundancy option. And as you can see, once I select geo redundant storage, it also gives me the option of cross region restore. Now, what does that mean? Right now, it is an enabled state. Now, if I go and enable it, Microsoft is going to bump it up from geo redundancy to RAGRS, right? And why that is so? Because of the complete region level failure, or that kind of scenario happens, you will be able to restore this in a secondary region in case the entire region goes down. This is relatively, I will say, new option as compared to some of the other options that you see here. So if you want, you can always enable cross-region restore. That can be done, right? So if you want, that option is there as part of uh, recovery service vault now. So let me come out of this. You also have some monitoring settings, right? You have cost management option. Let's look into the security settings. So right now, my security level is very poor, right? Because specifically, I've not selected anything. I've not enabled threat detection. I've not enabled immutability. Let me go and expand immutable vault. So you can see I can go and enable immutability while I was creating recovery service vault, and I can also enable it later on too, right? Now, once I go and select my immutability, I can go and apply for this, but there are certain considerations to be made in case we are talking about immutability. As you know, that once immutability is enabled, you cannot go and delete that recovery service vault, which is great and help you protect your data so nobody can tamper with that. But also certain consideration, once you go and enable the immutability, you cannot change the retention of your backup policy in a lower tier. So let's say, for example, if I have enabled immutability, actually, let me go and enable that and apply here. And if I enabled the retention, let's say for 90 days, I cannot go and change it to 89 days. I can go and always extend it, but I cannot go and reduce the retention on that one. So you can see now it has changed to fair, which is good. You can always do the threat detection, which is under, by the way, in preview. You can always update it, but by default, in case you want to enable threat detection, you need to be on a Microsoft Defender for Cloud Plan 1 or Plan 2. So that can be done if you want, right? But let's go and actually, let me show you about the immutability. For that, I'm going to go to the backup policy. So by default, Microsoft has couple of backup policies are created by default. But if you want, I can go and click on the Add button and select the resource I want. And this is relatively new, as you can see, enhanced. Previously in Recovery Service Vault, there was only standard backup policy. It means it will only allow you to back up once a day, right? Up to 5 days operational tier retention. But with enhanced policy, I can always go and enable that, and it will allow me to back up every 4 hours. That's the minimum that you can see here, but give you more control here, right? But let me just create a standard policy here. Right, I'm just going to take all these default and let's click on the create button. So the policy was created successfully. Let me go to the resources. And here's my policy. And if you see now, because I've enabled immutability on my vault, can I go and reduce the number of days? It's giving me error because as you can see that it's an immutable vault, right? Can I go and increase the retention? Yes, you can see that I can increase the retention. So just because immutability is there, proper consideration needs to be, you need to check from your compliance team and whoever is managing how you want to manage that, right? But uh, you can always go and remove immutability until unless it's not locked, right? So if you remember when I was applying immutability, there was an option of locking it. Let me just go back. So you see, once this is right now in unlock state, I can always go and remove immutability. But once I lock it, right, you can see confirm locking. Once locked, it cannot be disabled. I won't be able to disable this recovery service vault. So something to keep in mind in case you are trying to enable this service on your recovery service vault. But these are some of the ways actually you can go and enable Azure backup services. As I mentioned, now this in this case is completely cloud native. But in case you are deploying this in a hybrid kind of environment, you can always do depending upon how you want to manage it. Actually, let me just also show you that. So if I click on the backup button, if it's a hybrid environment, it will ask you where is your workload running. If it's strictly in Azure, it's no infrastructure needed. But let's say if you're running on-premises or even if you have Azure Stack of Family, you will need to, depending upon, again, if you want to just do file and folder level backup, you can just go and download Vault Agent or Mars Agent, what we call it, right? But in case you want to have application consistent backup, right? You're running multiple applications and that kind of stuff, then it will ask you to download what you call MABS or Microsoft Azure Backup Server on devices, and you can connect that to the domain, right? So some of the options that is unlocked by utilizing Azure Backup Services, but it's complete end-to-end solution with full integration with Azure Storage. So great way of protecting your workloads. So with this, we have also successfully created scenario number 2 for Northwind traders. With that, let's move on to the third and the final, which is for Woodgrove Bank. Over to you, Ashraf.
All right, so the third customer case, Woodgrove Bank, is a financial service organization with majority of its infrastructure hosted on-premise, supporting core banking applications, databases, and customer services. To meet availability requirements, the bank has invested in a secondary on-premise disaster recovery site, which has become complex and costly to operate, maintain, and regularly test. As the business grows and regulatory expectations increase, leadership is concerned about the bank's ability to quickly recover from a primary site failure and ensure uninterrupted operations. Woodrow Bank is now exploring Azure as a strategic DR and resilience platform to improve business continuity, reduce infrastructure and operational costs, and enable scalable, reliable recovery options in the event of an on-premise outage. So back to you, Girish. Please walk us through this final scenario.
Thank you, Ashraf. And this is another scenario which is quite relevant, especially for small and medium kind of businesses. And why that's the case? Because first of all, when it comes to SMB customers, they don't have the means to spend a lot of money on a dedicated DR site. That's one thing, right? But when it comes to business continuity and disaster recovery, what we hear in the partner community is that there are a lot of challenges which are associated with this, other than obviously the cost. One thing is that it's just not Windows-centric world. People, they're utilizing mix of Windows, they have Linux workloads also. They have moved away, let's say, from physical infrastructure, though there are quite a lot of them. They have started adopting virtualization technology, whether that's from the Microsofts, the VMwares, which obviously has been bought by other company, and even some other hypervisor. So the current disaster recovery solutions that they want to use does not support all these kind of scenarios and applications. And let's be realistic, a disaster is not happening every day, right? But still, as a company, there is a requirement in which you want to showcase that to your end customer that in case of that kind of scenario happens, you're able to responsibly recover your workloads and applications. So there has to be some sort of environment that can be created as part of the solution that you should be able to utilize. And then also we see that yes, we have in certain cases implemented DR or business continuity kind of solution, but when we utilize this, we face application error. There is also data loss. So all these challenges that partner community is facing, and they're looking at some sort of solution. And we always come across this question, I have backup. Do I need a business continuity solution or disaster recovery? Now, I will say in today's day and age, both of them are necessary because both of them, they serve different purposes and actually they complement each other. We talked about Azure Backup Services, right? So yes, if your data is corrupted, you face data loss or something like that, you can always recover by utilizing the backup services, whether it's cloud native from Microsoft, let's say, or even third-party solution. But in case you want a real-time replication, in case something, the entire site goes down, or even subset of the site, you want to protect it. In that case, we want to utilize business continuity solutions. So I will say in today's era, both of them are become essential for any cloud deployment. So what options Azure Disaster Recovery unlocks? So first of all, obviously, hybrid is the kind of environment that we come across. You can achieve true hybrid cloud by utilizing Azure Site Recovery. You don't have to fully go and invest in cloud. You can always utilize cloud as a DR site. You can always extend your data center, right? With minimal footprint, I will say, in cloud, if that's the way you want to operate, as in case of Woodgrove Bank, because they have most of the infrastructure which is sitting on premises, and they want to utilize cloud only in case of DR kind of scenario. So a great way of extending their data center. And then if you are a managed service provider, why not add these capabilities in your service portfolio? You can provide this as a service, you can provide disaster recovery as a service, or even backup as a service. You can go and have different revenue streams, right? So a lot of our partner, they are utilizing this. So great way of adding that into your cloud portfolio. So some of the ways you can go and implement this in your environment. So obviously, as I mentioned, that it does not matter what kind of operating system we have, whether we are utilizing Windows, Linux, any operating system. Also on different hypervisor, whether it's Hyper-V, VMware, even some of these hypervisors are not listed. That will be treated as a physical box. You can utilize that, and that will be Azure can be used as a DR site in that case. So great way of utilizing Azure as your failover site. And then another case scenario that we come across, and actually a lot of partners also utilizing this is for dev and test kind of scenario. As you know that a lot of developers, they have to get access to a production grade environment. And sometime carving out that environment from the production workloads becomes really challenges. Now, with ASR, you can also replicate this workload and keep it totally segregated from your production environment. So these developers can work on this production grade environment, work on it, and if the work that they're doing is successful, that can be applied on back onto their production environment. So great way of creating dev test environment without impacting their production workloads. And then on top of that, this gives you application-aware protections, whether you're utilizing different kind of Windows and even some third-party clouds databases, you can go and protect it. Some of these applications are listed. This is not just restricted to this. You can always go and check the support metrics on the Microsoft Azure website. But some of these applications which come across, for example, if you're running SQL Server, you have web services running, SharePoint, Exchange, all these different options can be utilized and protected by utilizing business continuity solutions like Azure Site Recovery. So again, in the end of the day, cost is important consideration for any company, and Woodgrove Bank is no different. So also let me show you how that's going to look like when you price out this opportunity for your end customer. And for that, I'm going to go back again to the pricing calculator tab. And again, you'll find this under the management and governance tab. And I can go and click on the ASR and add to estimate and pick my region of preference. And in this scenario for Woodgrove Bank, I'm going to pick how many instances they have, right? So let's say, for example, if they're talking about 10 instances, so you're going to pay for number of protected instances that they have. So in case 10, so 10 times 3471 per machine. And then there will be another cost component because the data needs to be replicated, and the way it's going to be charged is for your managed disk. So you can go and price it out. As you know that managed disk is part of Azure Storage Service. If you want, I can go and add it from here. It should be also part of the storage account. Let me go and add it. And let's say if I'm talking about 4 terabytes of data, or let's say 1 terabyte with 4 disk, I can go and change it. And that's going to be your another cost component. There will be some bandwidth charges also because the data is going back and forth. But these are going to be your two cost component. One cost is going to be your protected instance based on how many instances you have. And then the cost of the storage is going to be replicated. And then again, you can always save it, export it, share it. All that can be done, right? So this is the way you're going to price out opportunity for a business continuity scenario for Woodgrove Bank. And when it comes to configuring this, the good thing is that both backup services as well as your business continuity is part of the recovery service vault. So you don't need to deploy any service separately. I can go and enable this, and you can see that I have the enable site recovery button here. So I can click on this, right? So a couple of ways of managing it from here, right? You can also go to the replicated items. You can have a complete control over site recovery, but you can click on the enable site recovery. And then based on what infrastructure we are talking about, right? So actually one scenario I forgot to address here, even if you're running workloads within Azure, let's say if I'm running workload in Canada Central, and I want to replicate that to a secondary region, I can also use Azure Site Recovery for that. And if you look at the price scenario, that's going to be same for that too, right? But you can see that you also have this from VMware to Azure. You also have from, if you're running Hyper-V machines to Azure, that scenario can be also enabled. The only difference I will say in case of, let's say, a physical box or a VMware environment, you need to go and deploy an appliance. It's like a config slash processing server, or in simple term, you can call them a replication appliance, which will be responsible for replicating this. You can go and register by downloading the registry key. That's the only difference between a VMware and between a Hyper-V environment. Because for Hyper-V, as I mentioned, there's no appliance needed. You can go and just follow the steps here. You can go and specify I don't have any system center. You can go and add your Hyper-V site if you want. And basically, you're registering your site, and then that will be registered with an agent, which will be responsible for replicating this into Azure. And the good thing is that just one important point, while in the replication state, there is no compute charges. So what does that mean? It means that while it's replicating, you're only paying for the protected instance, and the storage it is getting replicated to. Uh, when you go and click on spin up the resources, at that particular state, the compute charges will start applying. But other than that, there won't be any charge for compute, I will say, by utilizing this service. You can always specify the target. You can specify how often you want to replicate. And once you click on the review button and register that hypervisor, your machine can be replicated, and you can be and in case, as he said, one of the important scenario in this environment is that you can always do a test drill. It means you can fail over your machines in a totally segregated environment, which is totally segregated from your production in case you want to test it out, or even if you want, if your developer needs access to your environment to test out something on the application, that can be also provisioned. But that's the way you can go and implement this service and even price this out. So with this, we have successfully completed all the scenarios. And before we take up any questions, right, let me also quickly talk about some of the cost optimization options which are available for you. Because in the end of the day, yes, any public cloud vendor you pick, in this case, Microsoft Azure, it has all the options available for you, all the services. But in the end of the day, if it does not make business sense, nobody is going to move, right? So one of the things that I always recommend that you can start maybe with infrastructure as a service, and then maybe transition into PaaS offerings. So some of these options can be part of that, right? So right sizing your machine is an important component for any cloud deployment. Then you can also utilize reserve instances and saving plan. In certain cases, also combination of both. You can take advantage of hybrid benefit. If you have on-premise licensing with software assurance, you can always utilize that. Spot instance is another great scenario for test and dev kind of environment, because you save 80% as compared to the regular pay-as-you-go. I also see a lot of time people, they utilize this. And sometimes machines are typically built for how long, or for on an hourly basis, how long these machines are running. You can also schedule this machine to start and stop at specific time in case you're not utilizing this out of your business hours. So that's another case scenario. But again, as I mentioned earlier, in certain cases, maybe transitioning from infra to a platform as a service offering can be an option also that you can go and look at it, right? So some of these optimization tips that you need to keep in mind. But again, if you are not sure about these options, you can always reach out to the Azure team. We'll be more than happy to assist. So with that, I will open up for any Q&A. If there is anything in the chat, Ashraf, or
No, I don't
that you
see
think.
any questions in the chat. We're almost on time. So before we wrap this up, I just want to say, if you'd like to continue the conversation, please reach out to your Azure representative at Ingram Micro. And if you don't know who your representative is, please, you can always email azurecanada@ingrammicro.com or reach out to me and Girish, and we'll connect you with your dedicated resource. I want to thank everyone for attending today's session and wish you all a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation. Really appreciate it.